Steak, come get you some. Steak, can you handle it? Steak from around the world. There, that's actually works. Steak is genuinely one of my favorite foods, and presumably one of yours if you clicked on this and you're watching it. And today, we're gonna explore all different kinds of steaks from around the globe, the world, the pale blue dot, Terra. It's steaks from around the world. Let's get started with, where are we starting? The USA. This episode is sponsored by Challenge Dairy, the new butter in my kitchen. Challenge, the butter with the elk on it, is in the same family as Danish Creamery, but Challenge has innovated the way we use butter. They have these cubes in 4 tablespoon chunks, so you can throw one into your noodles, your pan sauce, or your potatoes. Today I'm using butter in a few of these steak preparations, so you can see how to use butter in your steak and grilling recipes this summer. For more info on Challenge and to find yourself some butter cubes, scan the QR code or head to the link in the description. For this steak, I'm going as American as it gets and making a Tomahawk ribeye. Oversized, ostentatious, and positively loaded with fat, it's about as American as it gets. As with most pieces of whole meat, we're starting with a dry brine. I'm doing a 1-to-1 mixture of kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper, generously coating on all sides, placing on a wire rack set in a rim baking sheet, and letting stand at room temperature for at least an hour, or ideally fridging uncovered overnight. The salt draws out moisture, which over time is reabsorbed, making the steak tender, deeply flavorful, and susceptible to more profound browning. Now, the first adjective I would use to describe this steak is thick. Whenever that's the case, usually that means you want to do a reverse sear, burying a temperature probe at its thickest point and roasting in a 225 Fahrenheit oven until that probe reads 115 degrees Fahrenheit for what will eventually be medium rare. While that's going, I'm going to amp up the Americanness with some so-called cowboy butter, combining 2 sticks of room temperature butter with 3 cloves of grated garlic, pinch of red chili flake, 1 tablespoon Dijon mustard, tablespoon of horseradish, and kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper to taste. I don't know what makes this cowboy butter, but I must be a horse because I want it to ride me. Sorry. Mash until homogeneous, taste for seasoning, and then we're going to class things up by rolling this butter into a ballotine, which is just fancy speak for log. Dolloping the butter onto a sheet of plastic wrap, rolling up and shaping into a log, which can then be sliced into super sexy cylinders. Make sure it's nice and tubular, then chill for about 2 hours or until completely solid. Unwrap, slice, and make sure to let these cylinders come to room temperature before bringing it anywhere near your steak. Speaking of which, the big guy's headed out of the oven right now. Looking not so great, but don't worry, that's our next job. I'm going to brush the steak down on all sides plus the bone with a little bit of vegetable oil to assist in browning. Now, you could sear this steak on a ripping hot cast iron pan, but to better the browning of the bone, I'm opting for a blazing hot grill, preheated at maximum velocity for at least 10 minutes before brushing and oiling the grates, making sure that our giant's jointed juicy cow doesn't embarrass us in front of our family by sticking. Now, there's so much fat on this guy that there's gonna be flare-ups. As soon as that starts happening, move the steak to a different part of the grill, as flare-ups can cause a sort of carbonized burnt flavor. After 3 to 5 minutes, you should have fantastic color on every side of the steak, and the internal temperature should be bumped up 5-10 degrees Fahrenheit, which after the requisite 10-minute rest should translate to a final temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning a rosy red interior with fully rendered fat and meat that's tender, not slippery. Carve it right off the bone, slice it into steakhouse slabs. I like to orient the steak during slicing so that every piece has some of the cap, the ultra fatty band that goes around the outside of a ribeye steak. I also like to slice on a bias. Meat fibers in this kind of steak run vertically, so by cutting the steak on an angle, we're cutting across more of those fibers, resulting in an even more tender steak. Arrange on a platter with the bone just to be a show-off, and top with your cowboy butter while the steak is still hot, ensuring that it melts and bathes every slice in its cowboy buttery goodness.
Now, this is my territory. This is a United States steak.
Here we are, folks, one of my favorite steaks, personally. A bone-in ribeye, reverse seared and smeared down with cowboy butter, which is not a double entendre. It's a single entendre. Let's eat it.
Just the height of richness and excess. It's American as apple pie.
Definitely more elegant ways that you could plate it up, but this is one of my favorite ways to do it. It feels rustic, feels honest, naked, true. Cowboy butter. The beauty of the ribeye is this, the cap. The cap is one of the best pieces there is of cow. It's completely
just dripping with fat and so tender. It's so flavorful. It's almost like you took the eye of the ribeye and doubled all of its attributes. You've been saving up all those points, those skill points, XP, and you were like, you know what? Double everything. You ever done that? You know what combat is like after that? Like just how powerful you feel? Well, that's the ribeye cap experience. You know how the kids say no cap? Well, f you kids. I'm all cap.
Next up, we're headed to Turkey with shish kebab, combining 4 cloves of minced garlic, quarter teaspoon Aleppo, 1 teaspoon oregano, quarter cup of yogurt, 1 tablespoon of roasted red pepper paste, half teaspoon of sumac, 1 tablespoon of salt, and the juice of 1 lemon, which we're going to combine into a marinade for our meat. The meat of which is going to be 1.5-inch cubes of chuck, an inexpensive cut with great fat and flavor content. Mash around to coat evenly, maybe in a larger bowl than I'm using. Cover with plastic wrap and fridge for at least 2 hours, ideally overnight. Then we're going to build our skewers, which are going to be doubled up. This prevents the meat from spinning on the skewer, making it much easier to flip on the grill. Load up your skewer thick and proud. Then we're headed over to the hot side of an indirect grill, getting some great char on the meat on the hot side of the grill before moving it over to the cool side to finish cooking through to a rosy medium. While it's over there coming up to temp, I'm going to use the hot side of the grill to toast some lovely pitas, no more than a minute or so per side, and keeping warm in a clean kitchen towel. Then all there is left to do is whack off your meat, pile proudly on a pita, and garnish with thinly sliced red onions, a sprinkle of sumac, a squeeze of lemon, and some torn parsley. And there you have it, shish kebab. But how does it taste? For that, I'm going to hand it off to me in the past, because obviously I'm doing this voiceover after we shot this. It's confusing, but time travel always is.
All right, shish kebab. Let's try it. These being chunks of chuck, you want to cook them to like a solid medium because there's some connective tissue and stuff in there that if you cook it to medium rare, I know that's cool, but like it's just going to be a better eating experience if you push it to medium. And if you have, you know, family members that like their meat medium well done, pretty good option because you're marinating this meat. So it's just going to stay a little juicier and a little more tender thanks to the enzymes in the yogurt and the acid and the acids. Then those nice little sumac, onions and lemon on there. Sumac has a familiar kind of citrusy flavor. And then, you know, make sure you toast the hell out of your pita so you get this great char in there. Makes me want to get hair plugs just so I can make the trip, eat one of these.
But don't worry, I'm not going to do that. Next up, we're headed to Mexico for some carne asada. First, creating a marinade of 1 sliced jalapeno, 2 tablespoons neutral oil, 1 teaspoon kosher salt, the juice of 2 limes, about a quarter cup of lime juice, 3 smashed cloves of garlic, 1 teaspoon each cumin, chili powder, and coriander, 2 tablespoons panela or raw sugar, and a quarter cup of sour orange juice. These are pretty hard to find, so if all you can find are regular oranges, just supplement with a little bit of lemon juice. Last but not least, 1 can of Mexican lager. Particularly excited about this because I have never marinated in beer before. Mix all that up, make sure all the sugars and stuff are dissolved, and we're going to use that to marinate some skirt steak, a cut that responds particularly well to marination. Simply plop in a plastic bag or high-walled casserole and pour this hot, sweet, spicy, beery stuff over top. Massage around to make sure everybody's evenly coated and fridge for at least 4 hours and up to overnight. If you're using a bag, place it in a rimmed baking sheet to minimize chances of cross-contamination. Once marinated, they're going to look pretty gross. The acid in the marinade is going to make them lose their vibrant red color, but don't worry. After we thoroughly pat them dry and sear the hell out of them on a hot grill, you'll forget all about this grayish brown nightmare. Speaking of which, we're headed out to the same indirect grilling setup, dropping these guys first onto the hot side of the grill. Because skirt steaks are usually not terribly thick, the time it takes to sear them on both sides might be all the time they need to cook through. I'm also closing the grill in between flips to keep the temperature high. Once you've got some, let's face it, perfect grill marks on both sides, transfer things over onto the cooler side of the grill if they need some more carryover heat to finish cooking, and use the hot side of the grill this time to toast tortillas, because it is my intention to make some carne asada tacos. That is, if I don't lose too many through the grill. Now, once you've let these guys rest for 10 minutes, how you slice them is very important. Skirt steak has a very distinct grain that runs perpendicular to its length. So first I'm going to cut it in half to make it more manageable to slice. Then I'm cutting across the grain at an angle. Cutting those muscle fibers short is of the utmost importance, otherwise you're going to have a really stringy, really tough steak. I'm going to cut those slices into bite-sized chunks. I've tried too many times to use whole strips of steak in a taco, and it's just not a good look. Garnish with finely chopped white onion, sliced jalapenos, a squeeze
of lime, and some parsley pretending to be cilantro.
Carne asada, made with a little bit of parsley instead of cilantro because I want to like it. Let's see what we're dealing with here. This is a really, really great way to use cuts like flank and skirt and hanger, these tougher cuts that benefit both from being cooked and sliced a very specific way to maximize tenderness, but also marinated. And marinating in beer is a very, very cool move. Like, it adds this whole malty, yeasty element to it that I'm really enjoying. Married with, a little bit of heat and vegetality from the jalapenos, the nice acid of the lime and the, just freshness of the onions. This is one high quality taco. Also, carne asada, but skirt steak in particular, this is a great steak for when you have multiple diners who have different temperature preferences because they tend to be uneven. They tend to be really thick at one end, very thin at the other. Some even have thick points and thin points, and as a result, you end up with all different donenesses. There's no avoiding it. You can't cook this kind of steak uniformly. So it makes for great eating for when you have, people who aren't into red or medium rare meat. Losers. I'm kidding. That's what who would say. Who am I saying? Who?
Next up, a dish I've never tried from a place I've never been to, Crying Tiger from Thailand. First, a marinade of 2 tablespoons oyster sauce, 4 cloves, finely minced garlic, 1.5 tablespoons of granulated sugar, 1.5 tablespoons of fish sauce, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, and 1 teaspoon of ground white pepper. Give that a mix, and this time we're pouring it over flank steak, which, just like skirt steak, is uneven, tough and fibrous, and takes very well to marination. Same deal, Ziploc bag, 4 to 24 hours in the fridge, pat dry, and grill. This time I've got the right side all hotted up, sorry if that's confusing. I tend to prefer to grill marinated steaks as they require high heat, generate a lot of smoke, and tend to stick more easily. Being a much thicker cut of meat than a skirt steak, however, this guy's really going to rely upon the indirect grilling system, where it can gently come up to temperature after we've achieved a great crust on both sides. I'm pulling this guy when he's around 125, 130, which should carry over up to 135, 140, which is right where I like flank steak to live. Now to serve, we're going to make a sauce of 2 tablespoons lime juice, 1 tablespoon water, 1/4 cup of finely minced shallot, 2 scallions thinly sliced, 1/4 cup chopped cilantro, 3 tablespoons fish sauce, 2 tablespoons tamarind juice, a tablespoon of dried chili flakes, a couple pinches of sugar just to taste, and 1/4 cup of toasted rice powder. This is a pretty specialty ingredient, so if you can't get a hold of it, might not be authentic, but don't worry, it's still going to taste plenty good. Mix that stuff together, put it in a more camera-friendly bowl, and now it's time to slice and serve the steak. Once again, we want to locate the grain of this steak and slice across it, ensuring that the muscle fibers are nice and short and we end up with a juicy, tender steak. Fan them out on the plate, garnish with cilantro, and dig in.
All right, Crying Tiger. This steak is cooked very much to my liking. Flank steak has, enough sort of tougher connective tissue bits that I don't mind pushing it to a nice medium as long as it's a uniform medium. And Crying Tiger is also supposed to be righteously spicy, so we did load it up with the pepper flake there, but let's find out. The marinade is so fantastic just on its own because the soy and fish sauce and oyster sauce deeply flavor the meat, and then you add sugar to get this incredible browning on the outside. You can see how beautiful this crust comes out. That's because of the sugar. That creates caramelization way more quickly. So you do have to be careful of it burning. Yeah, this is a really exciting way to prepare steak, one that I'm definitely gonna be doing again. It's just a bold, I would say even unexpected flavor in the world of beef. So do with that information what you will. I'm gonna make some more, or no, I'm gonna eat some more.
Next up, we're taking a look at a Korean steak called Galbi. First, building a marinade in a blender, combining a 1/2 cup soy sauce, 1/4 cup of water, a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper, 2 tablespoons of raw sugar, 3 cloves of garlic, 1/2 inch worth of peeled and chopped ginger, 1/2 medium roughly chopped onion, and half a peeled, seeded, and roughly chopped Asian pear, one of the many things that gives Korean barbecue and bulgogi its unique flavor. Blend in a blender until blended, then I'm adding a tablespoon each sesame oil and sesame seeds, blending lightly so that the seeds don't liquefy, and pouring over some Korean-style short ribs, a tough, fatty cut made tender by our flavorful, complex marinade. Again, you can do this in a zip-top bag, but I thought it was about time I demonstrated it in a casserole. Give it a good shake and wiggle to make sure that everybody's evenly coated. And I forgot, you're supposed to put 2 thinly sliced scallions in there, so I'm just gonna sprinkle them over top and kind of convince them to be in the marinade. Just pretend that never happened, and then this guy's headed into the fridge to marinate for 6 to 24 hours. From there, it's a pretty familiar procedure. We're pulling it out of the marinade, patting it dry, give it a sort of wipe with your hand to remove any excess scallion or sesame seeds that would burn on the grill, which is where we are once again headed, where, just like the skirt steak, we are searing these guys hot and fast. Think of it like Korean barbecue. By the time it's got a great char on it, it's ready to go. Make sure your grates are extra brushed and oiled, because all the sugar and stuff in the marinade is going to want to make it stick extra badly. Get some gorgeous color on there and bring it on inside for trimming and eating, which we're going to simply do by trimming off the row of bones. This can be gnawed on by the chef as a snack later. This is also pretty commonly done with scissors at Korean barbecue joints, so if that's easier for you, this is one of life's very rare opportunities to use scissors on beef. Once you got the bones off, we're going to trim these down into bite-sized pieces, which we're going to pile high into a romaine lettuce leaf, topping with thinly sliced scallions, jalapenos, and garlic cloves, as well as a generous drizzle of samjang.
Galbi. This is our Korean entrant. This looks fantastic. Let's eat it. Korean style short ribs are cut not only across the bone, they're cut across the grain. So it's the same principle behind cutting across the grain with flank steak, skirt steak, hanger steak. It shortens the muscle fibers, so a notoriously tough, normally slow and low cut like short ribs become something you can just fire on the grill as hard as you can, as hot as you can, until you just can't take it anymore. And that's Galbi. The samjang sauce just brings this nice bit of heat. It's really nice to eat it in a lettuce wrap. It's gonna be nice to eat it with rice. Maintaining eye contact while you eat your power move. Didn't you just feel it shrink? Mine did the opposite.
Next up, Japanese Yakiniku style Wagyu, or perhaps more accurately, Australian style Yakiniku style Wagyu, because this is an Australian style Wagyu ribeye, which I'm going to trim down into a rectangular uniform piece, being sure to save the cap and fat for other uses, because today we're just going to focus on the eye, which I'm going to try to cut into as uniform slices as possible. This is a very precise and elegant dish, so the more attention to detail you can spare, the better. Now, the desired outcome for these tiny little slices is seared on the outside, rare on the inside. We could of course just slam them in a ripping hot cast iron skillet, but the more proper way is with a binchontan grill, for which we need to use binchontan charcoal, an extremely expensive, efficient, and long-lasting Japanese charcoal, one that takes a solid 15 to 20 minutes of continuous exposure to fire to properly light. I'm using a charcoal chimney, but you're probably better off just throwing these directly on the burners of your gas grill. While those get lit, we're going to make a very simple dipping sauce, combining a third of a cup of soy sauce, 1 teaspoon rice wine vinegar, a 1/4 cup each sake and mirin, 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, 1 tablespoon sesame oil, and 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds. Then this whole affair is just going to get cooked for about 5 minutes to cook off the alcohol from the mirin. Now our binchontan charcoal is fully ignited and it looks like rods of plutonium. I'm going to try to stack them as tall as I can in the binchontan grill. I want to hit these little slices with as much heat as humanly possible. Then, fun little trick I learned is to rub the grate down with a piece of your Wagyu fat. This is basically just a way cooler and smokier way to oil your grill grates. Just before grilling, I'm going to hit these guys with a gestural amount of kosher salt, just because grilling unseasoned beef feels immoral to me, but then again I have warped values. Now, as you're about to see, it is very important that this grill be ripping hot. This grill was running a little bit too cool, so it took an almost interminable 45 seconds for them to get a proper sear. This meat is so fatty and so much of that fat rendered out that it ended up curling the meat. I also went for far too dark a crust, and even at the Australian Wagyu price point, this is not a meat that you want to make mistakes with. For the next round, I rearranged the coals so that they were stacked higher, creating more direct heat on the grate and letting me flip the pieces sooner, ensuring that this beautiful beef only gets kissed with heat before serving.
So next up we have Wagyu. It's the big bad beefy bastard of the bunch because
It costs in excess of $80 a pound. At least this one did. A5 Wagyu is almost pure fat, and this is kind of where I like to live, actually. I like an Australian Wagyu or a less marbled Wagyu because it's just more palatable to me. We have two different preparations here, sort of a very rare proper preparation and a more like a medium accidental preparation. So, you know, let's go with the real deal, shall we? My bean shantan wasn't quite hot enough. You want a little bit more color on there, but I do know that this is cooked properly, at least. Nice and rare. Just enough heat for the fat to render out. So it's just dum-dum soft. It's just wildly, deeply beefy and fatty, mouth-coating, unctuous. And then the sauce both complements and cuts through it, which you need. It's so fatty that you can have it on its own. But I prefer it with a little bit of sauce. It's such an expensive piece of beef and one that is so labored over by the people who make it that, you know, it feels fitting that the best way to eat it is respectfully and minimally. Just kiss it with heat and optionally serve it with a bright, you know, punchy sesame-y sauce. This is beef, very fatty beef, soft, luxuriant, edging in on editorial. Melts in the mouth. Sick, hot, nasty ass beef. God, I love it.
Next up, we're headed to Guga country, that is Brazil, for the ever-popular picanha cut of beef. This is a specialty cut from the rump of the cow, with fibrous, well-marbled meat and a huge fat cap. To prep it, we're going to cut it into steaks across the grain. So once you cut it, you shouldn't see long strands of meat. You should see what look like the ends of a whole lot of little cables. When we serve, we're going to be carving across this direction, so everything's going to be super-duper tender. I'm cutting this into about 1-inch thick steaks, which felt plenty thick to me at the time, but I discovered was inadvisable. Brazilian steakhouse style picanha is cut into these sorts of steaks and folded over onto itself almost like you're making a C, or U, depending on whether or not you're lying down. It then gets threaded onto a spit so that it can then be rotisseried. I cut my steaks too thin, so they had a hell of a time getting on that spit, but eventually I got them on there. Next up, we're seasoning with one thing, coarse rock salt. You could definitely use normal kosher salt or any kind of salt you want, but this has a bit more theater to it. Once your meat is salted and spitted, we're headed back out to the grill, where I'm putting to use the rotisserie attachment that I bought online. My grill also sort of has this blast furnace in back for just such applications. I'm going to center these guys up with the heat source and set them to spinning for a completely unpredictable amount of time. It's going to depend on your heat source and the thickness of your steaks. But suffice it to say, you're going to want to cook these between medium rare to medium. Enough time for the fat cap to render entirely and for the meat to be rosy red inside. Now while these guys rest, we're going to whip up a very simple Brazilian salsa, a common condiment found in churrascaria. Finely diced white onion, green pepper, tomato, and parsley get combined in a large bowl, drizzled with olive oil and white vinegar, seasoned with salt and pepper, and tossed to combine. Bust out the beef and then pretend that you're a guy that's good at this while you're carving it up. Beef respects confidence. Again, we're carving along the side of the steak so that we're cutting across the muscle fibers, creating some nice, tender, shaved bits of beef. Top with the salsa, and get ready to be transported to my favorite place to have a birthday party in my 20s, the Brazilian Steakhouse.
Brazilian picanha. Whoever made this kind of screwed it up a little bit. I think they cut the steaks way too thin, so it was really hard to shave off. It looked like it was hard for them to shave it off. And it made the whole thing a little janky. So bear that in mind, but all that to be said, this is the legendary picanha cut of beef, rotisserie roasted, shaved, and here, right here. Whoever made it, that dude, still managed to do, I think, a really great job, even though I think they screwed up bad. Wow, is that the dialogue that goes on in my head all day? It is. Maddening. Huge pop of salt from that rock salt on the outside, so that's actually really nice. There's still some crunchy bits of salt on the outside. And, you know, nice hit of freshness from the salsa, but like the beef is so great because it's pretty much like a really classy roast beef. Like if you had roast beef, but you ate it while it was hot and with a fork and knife instead of, you know, the other way. Normally when you're grilling, fat drips down onto the heat element, flares up, and it puts soot all over your steak. And because this was elevated on the spit and getting heated both from the backsplash burner that I have in my grill, but also from the radiant heat below, it got to get all those like smoky hits of flavor when the flare-ups occurred without any of the soot or the more bitter, acrid elements that would have ended up on the meat. It's a really cool way to cook. I sure wish it was more accessible and something that you might even reasonably do. It's a damn fine steak. I'm sure I did everything wrong.
Next up, we're headed to France for something of a unique steak preparation, steak à poivre. Not only are these filet mignon going to be served with a peppercorn sauce, after being hit on all sides with kosher salt, they're also going to be crusted in peppercorns. Fresh, very coarsely ground peppercorns that we're going to toss around in a fine mesh sieve to filter out any smaller particles, which will much more easily burn when the steak is seared. Then we're going to press the top and the bottom of each steak directly into the peppercorns, basically creating a whole new surface area that's going to be seared instead of the beef. These guys are getting placed in a ripping hot, well-lubricated stainless steel pan, no more than 1 to 2 minutes per side so that the peppercorns don't burn. I'm also going to sear the sides of the steak a little bit to make sure that we have good color all around. Then these guys are headed onto a rack set in a rim baking sheet so they can slowly come up to temperature in a 225-degree Fahrenheit oven. Meanwhile, I've wiped the burnt oil out of the pan. I'm adding 2 or 3 tablespoons of challenge butter and using them to saute half a small finely minced shallot, using the moisture from said shallot to scrape up the fond off the bottom of the pan. Then I'm adding another tablespoon or so of freshly ground black peppercorns, letting them toast just for about 30 seconds or so until they're really nice and fragrant. And then it's time to play with fire, because while the pan's nice and hot, we're going to take it off the heat, adding about a half cup of cognac and igniting the fumes. Flambeing is really just for show. You do not need to do this, but also look at that fireball. I mean, you kind of need to do this, right? Let the flames die down and the alcohol cook off. Then we're adding 8 ounces of demi-glace, a super concentrated veal stock. If you can't get your hands on this, just boil a quart of beef stock until it's reduced by about 75% down to 1 cup. Likewise, once in the pan, this concentrated stock is going to reduce once again by half, creating a devastatingly rich, spicy, boozy, meaty sauce. We're going to cook it for a few more minutes until it's super thick and glossy, and then cut it with a couple tablespoons of heavy cream. Cook for about 1 more minute, and then it's time to carve and serve. These steaks have been cooked to 120 in the hopes that they will rise to the low end of medium rare, about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Any cooler and we'll have tough muscle fibers. Any warmer, it's going to be dry as a bone. Once again, I like carving on a bias. This just helps amplify tenderness. Fan them out, sauce them up, and with that, bon appetit.
Oh, the French champagne. Manufactured from French grapes, and I can't remember what he says, but I just remember that. Action, yes. Oh, the French champagne.
Ah, the French champagne.
But this is the French steak, so take that, Orson Welles. One of my favorite steak preparations. Oddly enough, one of the few steak preps, if any actually, where there's no real Maillard happening. Most of the high heat application, the browning takes place with the peppercorns, not with the steak itself. Perfectly, beautifully cooked. Bravo to that guy. Cognac in pan sauces can be really cloying, can taste really weird. In a poivre, it tastes absolutely perfect. It's like what cognac was invented for. Not for drinking, but for putting in this sauce. So far with all these steak preparations, what we're seeing is a great balance between flavors. Like this, the texture of the steak is really up to you. It's almost secondary. These preparations are about, you know, what do we do to complement these extraordinarily rich, meaty, beefy applications? And this has got to be the most sophisticated. I guess it's the French. And it goes really nicely with a little bit of measuring cup cognac.
Oh my.
Next up, we're headed back to the American South for a decidedly economical option, chicken fried steak. I have 2 discount shell steaks here that I'm going to trim the excess fat and connective tissue off of before using any number of means to pound out and perforate them. That is, get them flat and uniform and puncture repeatedly to tenderize. Most straightforward option is just a zip top bag and a Babish heavy bottom, hard anodized laser titanium forever nonstick saucepan. And then taking a pair of forks, or even 1 fork would be fine, and just stab
slapping the shit out of it. Not so much that it's falling apart, but this step is going to tenderize it so that we can eat it with a butter knife. The simpler but more specialty option is a steak needler, a device that pounds out and punctures in the same breath. This is, however, pretty much the only thing it can do, so I understand if you don't want to buy one. Once you got your steaks all smacked out and poked up, it's time to place them in a marinade/initial breading mixture. A combination of 1.5 cups of buttermilk, 1 large egg, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, and 1 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper, beaten together into a slurry and poured over our awaiting beef, where they can then marinate for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. While those guys hang out, we can make our red eye gravy, heating 2 tablespoons of challenge butter in a small stainless saute pan, and using it to build a roux with 2 tablespoons of flour. Whisk together and cook for 1 to 2 minutes, before slowly adding 1 cup of coffee, 1 little splash at a time, whisking each addition until it's completely incorporated before adding the next. It's going to look a little lumpy chunky, but don't worry, as long as you allow the liquid to completely absorb in the flour each addition, it will smooth out. Once you got all the coffee in there, we're going to cook this mixture for a couple minutes. Then I'm going to add a tiny splash of some Louisiana Crystal hot sauce, kosher salt, freshly ground black pepper, and I like to add a half cup of beef stock just to mellow out the coffee flavor. To that end, I'm also going to add a little drizzle of honey, taste for seasoning, and set aside until ready to serve. Next up, we gotta bread and fry our steak. I'm seasoning some all-purpose flour with half teaspoon each salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, about 1 cup of flour that I'm gonna tiny whisk until homogeneous. Then the steaks are headed straight out of the marinade and into this flour mixture, in about one of the easiest breading procedures yet discovered. Make sure every nook and or cranny is fully coated with flour before bringing these bad boys over to some 375°F neutral flavored oil, carefully dropping the steaks in away from you and frying for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes until deeply golden brown and cooked through. I'm also going to take a page out of the Colonel's book and filter out some of this deep fried flour goo and add it to my red eye gravy, which is just going to make things even more awesome. Saddle up your steak, give me that gravy, and get ready to disappoint your doctor, because all those numbers they've been telling you to keep down are about to go up.
Chicken fried steak. Good and crunchy. The steak is nice and tender. It's probably too hot to put in my mouth. It is. Every time I've had chicken fried steak, it's been with sausage gravy, which is wonderful, but it does drown out the steak experience. It just tastes like sausage gravy. This tastes like steak with coffee gravy instead of just gravy. You know what I'm trying to say, don't you? I mean this in the best possible way. That's nasty. You got a cheap ass cut of beef, you got a bunch of corn oil, you got coffee from yesterday morning. I think I know what you're making for dinner tonight. This, because this has to be far and away the most cheapest preparation of anything today. Dollars to donuts. I don't know if I like the other ones better. like this is gross, but in all the right way, in all the very best ways. Like steak, coffee, deep fried breading, cheap. It's not a flavor. It's so good. And if the question is, would I rather have this or steak à poivre, a fussy, Frenchy, fastidious food? I would say I don't know, because these are both just as delicious in very, very different ways. I've eaten half of it. I haven't done that with any of these yet.
Last but certainly not least, we have Bife de Chorizo, another form of picanha, this time sliced into steaks and served with a bright, fresh chimichurri, hailing from Argentina. This time, we're slicing the steaks with the grain. Feels counterintuitive, but then when your diners eat it, they'll be cutting across the grain themselves, making each bite tender. These guys are getting seasoned once again with the requisite rock salt, and they love open fire cooking in Argentinian steakhouses. So that's what I'm going to try to poorly imitate with my campfire pit. Unlike the so-called gaucho grill, a fire pit has no height adjustment and therefore no temperature adjustment. So these guys are going to sear at the rate that my fire dictates. I'm searing these guys on both sides and then giving their fat caps a little extra love to make sure that they're fully rendered, because this is a steak for fat lovers. And by fat lovers, I mean people who love the actual channels of pure fat that run around the outside of some steaks. Last up, we're making our chimichurri table style. That is combining equal parts oregano and parsley, seasoning them with salt, and then finally chopping them into almost a paste. Place Place this in a bowl with 1 clove of garlic, grated, a pinch of crushed red chili flake, and a ratio of about 3:1 extra virgin olive oil to red wine vinegar. That way, when we beat this together with a fork or tiny whisk, it's going to emulsify into a sauce. If it's too thick, add oil. If it's thin and it has a layer of oil floating on top, add vinegar. What you want is a thin dressing-like herb sauce. Season to taste, slice up your picanha, admire just how darn juicy it is, and slather with chimichurri to your heart's content.
Bife de chorizo. I don't know why it's called that. Isn't chorizo a kind of sausage?
Yes. I'm confused.
I love this. I loved cooking it because I love things over open fire, but also I love that you can see it on the whole steaks before slicing. See that just sort of subtle pinkishness out on the outside? That's just smoke. That's just smoke that's been absorbed by the beef. This is a fat lover's dream. I'll tell you why. You got that cap. Picanha has a huge fat cap, so you just basically get this gigantic chunk of rendered fat that you get to just eat at your leisure. You can cut off as much or as little as you want. It's your decision. In Argentina, you're in charge.
The name is derived because the steak is supposed to be slightly cylindrical and elongated in form, which bears resemblance to a sausage. But it has nothing to do with the sauce.
Well, that's why Bife de chorizo, because it looks like a sausage. Not. This is a fantastic way to make steak. Not only is it super fun, easy to grill steaks over an open fire, but also you get this great textural choice, how much fat you want, how much meat you want in each bite. You get the nice like smoky flavors from the fire. It's very strong flavor. So then you got this super bright, herby, fresh chimichurri cutting through all of it. I've said cutting through all of it like 10 times now. Well, folks, that's it. 10 different steaks from 10 different points on this big blue ball of beef we call Earth. I got to experience a wide variety of different flavors and textures and treatments of the cow. And that's a very interesting experiment to undertake, because then it gets you thinking, what can I try differently next time? What flavors can I combine? What techniques can I combine? So I encourage you to try some of these yourselves, to try seeing what works between the different techniques, and to be a little bit kinder to your neighbor. After all, they came up with all this shit. So can't be that bad, right? Stop being racist is what I'm saying. Please comment below, what was your favorite steak you saw today? Which ones did I miss? And what food do you want to see me explore next? Chicken from around the world. Here's chicken from all over. Actually, that didn't sound that bad.
Yeah. I was like, that's
We'll see you next time on Chicken from Around the World. We'll see you next time on Around the World in 10 Chickens. Around the World in 10 Biftekes de Chorizo. I'm Andrew Babish, and this has been Daily News. I've loved working with Danish Creamery, so I'm excited to partner with another butter in the same family, Challenge Dairy, the one with the elk on it. Challenge is special because all of their dairy farmers are in California, and the butter is all made in California. So there's no more than 48 hours from cow to butter. This means the butter is incredibly fresh, and that Challenge is sustainable with a low carbon footprint. With these new butter cubes, Challenge is perfectly portioned and ready for your next kitchen project. I can't wait to show you what we get up to next month with more butter. For more info on Challenge and to find yourself some butter cubes, scan the QR code or head to the description.